Oh, Roland's on our show all the time. He's kind of a big wig. He's a commentator on TV One and host of News One Now. Roland, great to have you.
Hey, John, what's happening?
I'm going to start with a clip here. Attorney General Eric Holder on Ferguson, and I want to get your thoughts.
But I want to first address the heinous and cowardly attacks that occurred against two brave law enforcement officers in Ferguson, Missouri just last night. I want to be very clear here. I unequivocally condemn these repugnant attacks. I know that all of us in the law enforcement family and all Americans are really across the country are praying for the safe recovery of those two officers. And I stand ready to offer the full investigative resources of the United States Department of Justice, the FBI, to solve this crime and to hold these perpetrators fully accountable. What happened last night was a pure ambush. This was not someone trying to bring healing to Ferguson. This was a damn punk who was trying to sow discord in an area that is trying to get its act together and trying to bring together a community that has been fractured for too long. We are redoubling our commitment to restoring faith in the integrity of law enforcement wherever that faith has been eroded. Today I am announcing 3 significant new steps that we're taking as part of this exciting initiative. First, we have selected 6 cities to serve as pilot sites for innovative strategies to strengthen bonds between police and the citizens that they serve. In Birmingham, Alabama, in Stockton, California, in Gary, Indiana, in Minneapolis, Minnesota, in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, as well as in Fort Worth, Texas.
Okay, so, Roland, Eric Holder addressing the Ferguson situation, seems to be saying the right things. The bottom line is, I know that you've been on top of this issue as well as anybody. I think you're pretty clear-headed with it. Can you share with our audience your thoughts now on what exactly has gone down, the riots, the police shooting the other day? What's the deal now here?
Well, I think first off, I actually interviewed on my show yesterday a couple of individuals, one who was a photojournalist who was there, who talked about that the shots rang out about 125 yards away from even what the protesters were. So I think when people, a lot of people say, oh, my God, protesters were doing this. I'm going, well, first of all, police haven't even said that. They haven't even made that perfectly clear. And so, because they were also put in harm's way. That was pure lawlessness, and you have to deal with that. The Attorney General was 100% on the money in how he described that, and so his response was appropriate. Now, there are those folks out there who want the protests to end. They don't want this to continue. But here's what I do believe is critically important, and that is if the folks there in other parts of the country, if they had just gone back to business, if they had just sort of just said, well, we're not going to keep the focus on this, we would not still be talking about it. It would not still be covered. I don't believe he would have the action. Congressman Bobby Scott told me when it came to his bill that was passed in the House in 2013 that dealt with police having to report to the Department of Justice when someone is killed by a police officer in their custody or in the streets. He said that were it not for the protesters, the protests in October, November, December, it would not have passed the Senate. And so when people say they should just stop, well, the reality is the continuing protest keeps attention on the issue, and to me, that is valuable, and I cannot tell an American not to do what the Constitution allows for you to do, and that is the freedom to assembly, the freedom of speech, and the ability to protest. Okay,
so we understand the protesting, and I think you make a lot of sense saying that there was a real policy change outcome attached to that, and I've heard Bobby Scott say the same thing. So, Roland Martin, you're right on the money with that. Question now is, I guess people were saying, what are they protesting? Okay, the Justice Department spent all this, 50 FBI's there. They did this big analysis. They exonerated Darren Wilson. So that's that. I mean, they said there's no wrongdoing in the shooting of Michael Brown. And then Eric Holder said, look, either you're going to change the police department in Ferguson because we have all this evidence of racism, or I'm just going to come in and dismantle it. And then people resigned, and they're changing it. So in some people's minds, they're saying, well, why is the protest going on? What are they protesting?
Well, but again, though, they are protesting the continuous actions. And when you want change, you don't just say, well, there's a report, there are a few resignations, okay, we can go home. No, you want to change the entire system. They also are continuing to protest because you also have an election on April 7th where you have folks who are running for city council. And so the protests are meant to keep the pressure up to still drive the issue. Just because the city manager and the police chief and the clerk has resigned, the clerk was fired, just because 2 police officers were allowed to resign does not mean that somehow, hey, you know what, we could just go back to business. No, the protests are about continuing that whole deal. I understand. And so this is the beginning of a process. This is the beginning of an effort to reach accountability. But if you take away the protest, if you take away the pressure, then all of a sudden we just go back to business as usual. I mean, a perfect example. Imagine if the Tea Party said in 2010, okay, we took control of the House, our protest, our organizing, our mobilizing work, our job is done. No. They kept going, and they kept going, they kept going. Who got control of the Senate in 2012? The Republicans did. And so when you are organizing and mobilizing, you just don't shut it down because a few things happen. The people out there also have an agenda. They want there to be special prosecutors in the cases where there's a police-involved shooting. Those state laws haven't been changed. They want more changes when it comes to public policy. How many police departments across the country since August have actually passed body cameras? Los Angeles did. Houston did. Baltimore is on their way as well, so they want to push that as well. So there are a multitude of issues that they are asking for, that they are looking at, that need to be addressed. And so they're saying this is just the beginning of a process. It's not the end.
Roland, let's go to the Darren Wilson exoneration. You know, when this thing started, there was a lot of us, including me, that were very suspect of this shooting because the guy was unarmed. But now, you know, we've had the Justice Department come in there. The guy's exonerated. Meantime, his career's destroyed. That process played out fairly.
Well, first of all, I go back to the root issue. And the root issue is shooting takes place, and then we deal with the reaction after the shooting took place. And that is from the police chief and from the mayor in terms of how they responded and how they did not exert any real leadership after that took place. And so you look at that. So you have this investigation. So federal charges are not filed against him on the federal level and also on the state level. But here's what we also do know. As a result of this is the key. As a result of the Mike Brown killing, of the investigation of Darren Wilson, that led to the investigation of the police department, which led to the investigation of the court system. And all of a sudden, we now have the results of that investigation that's uncovering a hell of a whole lot of more. And you're not talking about this whole issue of forfeiture, how poor folks are being targeted when it comes to these warrants.
Right.
And so as a result, this thing became bigger than Mike Brown, bigger than Darren Wilson. And now what we are seeing is what is systemic in that city. And so, yes, Darren Wilson was cleared, but the city of Ferguson wasn't cleared. Mm-hmm. Darren Wilson was cleared, but the police department in Ferguson wasn't cleared. And that, to me, is the result, and I certainly appreciate the DOJ report showing that. And so people need to ask themselves, Had there been no DOJ investigation, had people not protested and demanded federal charges against Darren Wilson, would we be standing here right now? Would they still be sitting here? Would you have racist emails flying back and forth in the police department? Would you have a clerk sitting here slapping folks with fines who owed $170,000 in back taxes? Would we even realize how wrong they've been running that particular city? The answer is we would not.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. I see where you're going with that. Before we get to body cameras, I got about 3.5 minutes. Do you think the University of Oklahoma made the right decision in expelling those students?
I believe that based upon what President David Boren said in terms of violating a student code of conduct, that they did make the right call. I think one of the things that we have to recognize when we talk about universities they are essentially small cities. They are small towns. When you talk about 20, 30, 40,000 students, and when you talk about what was said in the city, it was interesting, John. I'm watching all these people, and I love the people who are reacting to what used to be N-word, which, and I've talked about this here, where I've said totally eradicated from our society. But the thing that really jumped out at me was the fact that he was talking about lynching, hanging from a tree. That was domestic terrorism. 4,000 African Americans killed, lynched over a 75-year period in America. And that's what really stood out to me. And he's also dealing with a culture. And when you're dealing with a culture, that goes beyond the actions of one particular person. I understand if somebody says, well, this is a slippery slope. Totally get that. Totally understand. But what I do believe that we must understand that our actions do indeed have consequences. And now we're seeing that there are other Sigma Alpha Epsilon chapters who are now under investigation for saying song with racial slurs. And the point that I made yesterday on MSNBC, which I think is critically important, is that when you have the private actions like this, for me, what calls into question is, what happens when you go into the job force? What happens when you're not hiring? What happens when it comes to limiting opportunities? What happens when you have a point of view that can impact somebody else's life because you're now a decision maker? So this thing goes far deeper for me than just this one guy or several others making a comment. It deals with really a mentality that has far-reaching implications.
Do you think this is isolated on campuses, or you think it's epidemic?
Oh no! Well, first of all, I cannot call it an epidemic, but I do not believe it is isolated. And also, I take offense when it was like I had to correct Joe Scarborough yesterday when he kept talking about the South. I said, Joe, wait a minute. We've had racial incidents take place at Penn State, at the University of Michigan. I said, let's not act like this is a Southern thing. This is an American thing, and we must understand that, and we must deal with it. Is it as pervasive as it was in the 50s and 60s? No. But the difference between the 40s, 50s, and 60s, John, is that the sign said whites only, colored only. The question is, do we have in our minds and hearts whites only, colored only? That, to me, is the real issue.
All right, and that's going to end our segment. We're out of time. We want to thank Roland Martin for being with us, TV One, host of News One Now. It's always a pleasure to have you on. Great perspective.